Did you know the Bible talks about current events that are happening right today? Things like marriage, racial tension, abortion, sex, and many other topics. You will be quite interested in this series of videos entitled In Times Like These. Stay tuned. Hi, Wayne Emmons here. Have you ever wondered why there is so much hunger in the world? My question is not so much about physical hunger, although we are probably aware that over 80% of the population on this planet suffers from malnutrition. But my question relates to spiritual hunger. Why are there so many people emotionally drained and perhaps even mentally unstable? Could it be that our generation is starving for truth? You just read from the book of Amos, one of thousands of absolute truths found in the pages of this book. The Bible tells us, for example, there will be famine of truth in the last days. A famine that affects the mind rather than the stomach. The prophet Amos was not a trained preacher or educated theologian. He was a simple laborer, a farmer, a tender of sheep, but nevertheless he was called by God to speak the truth to a sinful nation. This message was declared by other prophets as well, like Ezekiel in 7th chapter, 22nd verse, and Micah, the 3rd chapter, 6th verse. You may be saying, well, that was a message to Israel, to the Jewish people. And you would be correct. But wait. Look at what is happening in America and nearly every other nation on this planet. And besides, if America falls, what effect would that have on Israel? America may be living in a fog of self-deception about her stability. Consider the following points. There is too much emphasis on sensual experiences at the neglect of spiritual and rational ideals. And most major religions and other institutions have sharply diminished in their faith in the one true God. Nations are drowning in an ocean of debt, and the wealth gap is approaching a 100-year high. Elected politicians are so divided by rigid ideologies that it's difficult for them to get anything accomplished, and significantly fewer people are involved in civic activities, and even fewer attend church. The younger generations are abandoning religion. The swift acceptance of gender identity based on feelings is a clear sign of a search for something beyond oneself. Pornography has skyrocketed, and marriage and families are free-falling like lead balloons. When considering the irreconcilable conflict between religious liberty and gay rights, the latter is winning by a mile. And many church leaders don't seem to realize what's going on, much less how to address the dilemmas. I challenge you to read the book of Romans chapter 1 and the book of 2 Timothy chapter 3 in this Bible. You will discover that topics just mentioned were foretold centuries ago. They are happening today. It only takes catastrophic events such as war, economic depression, plagues, or some other severe and prolonged crisis to bring the legitimacy of the liberal left-wing socialist system into light. People with common sense come to a stark realization that so-called social justice warriors and the supporters of their cause are not normal people who live by common sense. There is not one example in history where a socialist regime has been perpetually beneficial to the human race. And America, as well as European nations, are not immune from such a fate by continuing with the pattern described during the past few minutes. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul warns, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." Bible prophets were ridiculed and even persecuted for saying such things, even though they were trying to help people avoid the wrath of God. In this video series, in times like these, I will be addressing several topics that are important to God as verified by scriptures in the Bible. And I will also present some startling information regarding the condition of today's society. The location of relevant Bible scriptures will often be displayed across your screen, and also occasionally a number will flash that will correspond to a reference list at the end of the presentation. In both cases, I encourage you to personally verify and research what you hear today. Look all around us. Everywhere you turn, there is widespread spiritual famine, rumors, lies, learning without the ability to absorb the real truth. People are trying to find hope in a seemingly hopeless society. Now for some good news. The good news is that the antidote for the spiritual hunger can be found in this book, the Holy Bible, God's Word. When you are physically hungry, it's not enough simply to sit down at the table. You must take in the food. The same is true for spiritual hunger. While 80% of the Earth's population has access to the Bible, only a handful of those 80 billion people read it, and only a very small portion of those actually study the Bible. Dr. David Jeremiah, in his recently published book, Where Do We Go From Here?, explains that our very culture is under threat from spiritual malnutrition in at least 4 ways. Our heritage is being lost, our theology is being lost, our Bibles are being overlooked, and our spiritual appetite is being ruined. Let's look at each of these a little bit closer. It's not just our knowledge of the Bible that is being lost in today's culture. It is the integrity of our Christian history. How many children know that the first thing George Washington did after he took the oath of office as America's first president is that he stooped down and kissed the Bible? How many children know that the Liberty Bell is encircled by the words of Leviticus 25th chapter 10th verse? How many know that written in stone atop the Washington Monument is an exclamation that praises God? How many children grow up learning the 23rd Psalm or the Lord's Prayer? And if you as a parent are thinking that our kids are learning such things from their teachers in public schools, do I have some surprises for you. Our theology is being lost. George Barner and his research team issued a 2020 report warning. American Christians are undergoing a post-Christian reformation. Barner states, the most startling realization is how many people from evangelical churches are adopting unbiblical truths. His research continues. What used to be basic, universally known truths about Christianity are now unknown mysteries to a large and growing share of Americans, especially young adults. It's not simply the liberal mainstream denominations that are diminishing their doctrines. It's evangelical churches also. And while trying to reach a resistant audience, too many of these churches are compromising biblical truths. Popular speakers cave into processing God's word through cultural filters rather than presenting the unadulterated truth from God's message. And when we turn our backs on God and His word, God may turn His back on us. The book of Romans speaks of God giving people over to their sinful desires. See Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 22. According to Jeremiah Johnston, the average American household owns between 3 and 10 Bibles, but 42% of American Christians are too busy to read them. I heard on the news the other day that hard copies of the Bible are no longer available for sale online in the nation of China. And of course, Islamic nations have restricted their people from exposure to the scriptures for decades, even centuries. In America and other Western countries, the Gideons are running into problems getting their Bibles into hotel rooms. I read somewhere that the percentage of hotels willing to offer Bibles in their rooms has dropped from 95% to 48%. A child that gorges on junk food and candy in the afternoon won't have much desire to eat mommy's meal at the dinner table, and people grab a handful of scriptures, take a bite, and spit them out like a child spitting out spinach. And nowadays, if you share the gospel in a public square, you will be frowned on, mocked, accused of hate speech, and even threatened. The Bible is God's gift to the human race. It contains all the spiritual food needed for life and eternity. It's so simple that a child can understand it, and yet it is so in-depth that the greatest scholars uncover previous mysteries. And it's yours. It's yours as a gift from God. Simon Peter spoke as a deeply burdened man. We read this in 2 Peter 2nd chapter. And so did the Apostle Paul. Look at Acts 17th chapter. And of course, Jesus felt the same burdens, Matthew 23rd chapter. So please hear me. My life has been nothing close to that of Peter and Paul. And I'm far from being the only perfect person that has ever walked this earth. That's Jesus Christ. You may want to hear my personal testimony in another YouTube posting entitled, Jesus? Really? Yes, indeed. However, I know that I've got to do my utmost for Christ. There are several topics I will be presenting in this YouTube series entitled In Times Like These. In just a few seconds, you will see a list of topics planned for this series. And I hope you will touch the subscribe button below so you will know when they become available. And also touch the like button below to let others know what you thought about today's presentation. This is Wayne Emmons, helping you find truth, and I hope you will discover it for yourself. May God bless you.